Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the football card sets of Coca-Cola's Monsters of the Gridiron campaign in 1993 and 1994. And I got to start this off by just a little nod to the history of Coca-Cola in terms of marketing, because there is no company at all that mastered marketing to the degree that Coca-Cola did. I mean, for crying out loud, they are part of Americana. Coca-Cola is an indelible part of the whole vision that we have of the entire century. They really did master it, and they found amazing ways to tuck themselves into all sorts of different kinds of experiences. I mean, when you think of the Olympics, if there's a brand associated with the Olympics, it's going to be Coca-Cola. If you think about sports, you're like with football, you're going to see Nike and Reebok as prominent brands, but Coca-Cola is going to be right in there with it. They have done such a great job of just infusing themselves in every facet of how we experience the world. And it's almost ironic that there have been very few cards that have had Coca-Cola associations. Most notably, the early 80s, there were a couple of Topps sets, or Topps team sets, that had Coca-Cola symbols on them. But apart from that, there really hasn't been much. And that's because they haven't really needed to. I mean, for crying out loud, in the world of trading cards, there's a whole subsection of trading cards just for Coca-Cola related memorabilia. So when it comes to sports cards, we have had very, very, very few Coke sets in any capacity. And so that's why these two sets are really interesting, along with the fact that they're just really interesting. So Coca-Cola wanted to, in the mid-90s or early to mid-90s, they wanted to do a team up with the NFL with this really cool idea, which is they wanted to do something around Halloween. And Halloween comes right at the height of the NFL season, because that's the window of time when most teams are still looking at making the playoffs. There are a few teams that by that time they've already sunsetted that idea. And unfortunately, as a Bears fan, I've been experiencing that a lot this century, which I'm not really excited about. But the NFL season is really kind of at a vibrant spot. And so Coca-Cola wanted to tie in with a really cool idea of combining Halloween with the NFL in a way that actually makes a lot of sense. But you got to think outside of the blocks to come up with the idea, which is a lot of NFL players have some really interesting nicknames that are kind of Halloween related. Well, why not do a costume photo shoot related to that? And that is what this set is all built around. So in 1993, Coke did this whole thing, which was Monsters of the Gridiron. And it was a whole campaign that was multifaceted. The core of the whole campaign, though, was cards. They did do a couple of posters, but the posters were kind of, I believe it's only just a small handful of posters, and I don't know if it's just 93 or 94. I don't know how that worked, but there were a couple of posters, but for the most part, it's just cards. And the cards are, well, they're normal size cards. These are not manufactured by a company. In 1993, they're just standalone, produced for this particular campaign. And the card set is a 30-card set. The first card is a checklist card with the logo for the campaign on the front. And on the back, you can see that the checklist has, the players are in alphabetical order, not team order. They're in alphabetical order, and they have the name, and then they also have the nickname for each one of the players. So that's the way that they built the set. But the cards, well, the cards are pretty special. They're full bleed images of pictures of players, the actual players in these Halloween costumes that they were given to wear. It has a school photo shoot backdrop, and on the card back it talks a little bit about the player, the nature of the player. And that's what the card is. There's nothing else to it. I mean, obviously the logo on it, but that's it. It's just a straightforward opportunity to see a portrait of the player in the outfit. Now sometimes the pictures are a little bit more interesting. They're a little bit tighter in. There's like some action going on, but for the most part, it's just showing these players in these costumes. And you might notice with Derek Thomas, well, is that Derek Thomas? I mean, for crying out loud, you can't see his face. The only part of Derek you can see is his hands. But the thing is, yes, that is Derek Thomas. There are 29 players who came in We're given costumes to wear, and then we're photographed. Even though in most of these cases you can't even see the players. So you got to give the players credit for showing up, looking at that, going, oh, that could be anybody, but it was the players. So it is it's a quirky set, but man, the variety of images, or the variety of costumes that they came up with. And you'll notice that these are not necessarily costumes that a wardrobe specialist would come up with. This is what a props department would come up with. I mean, it's amazing to look through the different costumes that they came up with and gave the players to wear. They run a really wide span, and the interesting ideas they have, these are not costumes that you're going to go to a costume party wearing at all. You're just not going to do it. They're not usable. They're very elaborate in some cases. It's really interesting. But that's the 1993 set, and that's about all there is to talk about in 1993. They did do a few other things in the promotional campaign, but for the most part, it's just straightforward, just this 30-card set, and that's about it. So in 1994, they decided to do the same thing, essentially, except everything got bigger. In fact, the card release was a lot bigger in 1994, so the 93 set is a little trickier to come by than the 94 set, which is there are tons of the cards. But everything about 94 was bigger and more impressive, with one caveat, which we'll get to very shortly. So, for 1994, the card set does not start off with a card number 1 checklist with the title on the front. The checklist is actually a standalone card, because this is a 30-card set like the previous year, but in 1994, we now had 30 teams, because we had 2 expansion teams. So the checklist is either a card number 31 or a card number 0, either way, but it's not built into the set. And this gave the set the ability to be 1 card per team, and they laid the team out, or they laid the players out according to teams. So it was laid out in a way that really gave a better range for collectors to have a player for their team, whichever team that was. And you can see from the checklist that the design is now, it's got more of a punch with that green color, but it also has a design element around it that is definitive to the whole set, which actually kind of translates out to the entire marketing program that they did for the Monsters of the Gridiron. So the cards in 1994, you can see that they have, again, they have the dominance of that border on the outside, that splash of green color. The card backs are more professional, and the pictures tend to be a little bit closer in. There's not as much of the portrait mentality. And so the whole card set feels very different, but it does feel more like it's a part of something bigger. That is a definitive thing about the 1994 card set. And with Derek Thomas, you can see that the costume is similar to 1993, but not identical. Probably not identical. But that's where this really needs to be distinguished, because a lot of these players, the pictures are the same photo shoot as 1993. In fact, with Emmitt Smith, it's literally the same picture that they used. It's just a little bit tighter in and with a border. That's the only difference. But with card after card after card, you do have the 1993 photo shoot. The cards in 1994 are more images from that same photo shoot. So they used a lot of the images of the previous year, but not for every single player, in part because a lot of players were new additions to the 1994 set. So you do get some variety, and for some team collectors, you're going to notice some similarities between them, even if the 2 pictures look radically different. And that's a great strength, is when you have 2 shots of the same player, but the pictures come across very different. That's good. Emmitt Smith card, not so much. But like I said, there are 30 teams, which includes the Carolina Panthers and the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I just got a note, I find it interesting that Panthers and Jaguars are basically the same thing. So it's kind of funny that they both had those logos, but sorry, had to get that off my chest. At any rate, the teams existed, but there was no roster. It would be another year when they would put together a roster, so that meant there was no player to showcase. So they used the art of the logos. But they used a werewolf-like approach where instead of just the actual cat, It's like the cat is a player that turned into a cat, which makes it thematically fit very much with the rest of the set. But they're not the only art cards in the set, because there are a couple of player cards that are actually artistically altered. So that means that you almost have some comic book-like qualities to some of the cards in the set, if you're into that kind of thing. So it's not just straight pictures. Although, again, the pictures in this set run a wide range, and some of them are really, really fun. But that's not it for these cards, because even though there are these 31 cards that were available in packs and in complete set form, they also had another set release that you could get with gold. It was a gold parallel with gold foil for the logo. And that's the only difference between them, but all of these cards do have a gold foil parallel. So for team collectors and player collectors, there are 2 versions of each of these cards to collect, except there's actually more, because they also did tattoos. Now these are little rub-on tattoos. They're a little bit smaller than the Fleer Skybox tattoos from year 2000. So they're a little bit narrower than the width of a card, kind of small, but they had these for every single one of the 30 teams, plus the logo for the whole, the monsters of the Gridiron. And then they had another release, which was lapel pins. So you get these pins, but the pins came in packs. So you get a pack, open it up, and find out who you get. And so every single player has a regular card, a gold foil card, has a tattoo, and they also have a pin. So you can collect the entire set of pins as well as the actual cards in the set. And again, that's 30 pins plus the 31st, which is in place of the checklist. It is the logo. So that's what you can collect if you're a team player, a team collector, or a player collector. Except there's another iteration of this related to players, which is ticket stubs. And for ticket stubs, they did 6 different ticket stubs, 1 for each conference. So in the mid-1990s, they still had 6 conferences, 3 in the AFC, 3 in the NFC, 5 teams on each conference, now finally. And so if you got the ticket stub, you had all 5 of the players, or 4 players in the logo, the team logo for the expansion team. At any rate, you got all 5 of them featured on that stub. So if you're a Derek Thomas collector or a Steve Atwater collector, they're both on this stub. So that's another way to collect your particular team or player. Or you can collect all 6 stubs, and get the complete set of these if you care. But that was the last thing they did that was related to players. But there is a little bit more that I want to talk about with this. Not much, but I just wanted to tack on to a little bit of how the breadth of this whole marketing campaign, so that you get a little bit more of a feel for how this wasn't just these particular cards, but there was more to it. Because they also had, so they had the phone cards. And phone cards, for those of you who don't know, this was a big deal in the 90s because most of us did not have cell phones. There were payphones everywhere, and this card gave you a credit card specifically for phone calls, which was actually kind of handy. So they did that as a promotional giveaway. But the big thing was they had scratcher cards. And these scratcher cards, if you scratched it off and you won the prize, they had a pretty wide range of prizes that you could win, including they had a mini foam football. They had some hats. In fact, to my knowledge, there are 3 different types of hats between 1993 and 1994. So you could also win a hat. You could win a jacket. But there was another really interesting thing, which you may have noticed in other videos. I have a can of Coke here. Only it's not actually a can of Coke, so don't worry. This isn't something I forgot and it's been sitting here open. This is a t-shirt in a can. And specifically, this is from the Monsters of the Gridiron contest. So if you got one of these, it's a pull-top tab. And it's, not a pure can, it's a cylinder, but inside of this is, I think, an XL t-shirt. Let's see, does it say? It does not say, unfortunately. Oh well, but I think it's an XL size. It doesn't matter, I'm not opening it. But they did have, as part of this whole campaign, a shirt in a can. So they were having a lot of fun with this. They even did one of their gold Coke bottle commemorative gold Coke bottles that was themed for this. They have had a whole bunch of these that they did in the 90s. I was really tempted to get one to show you in the video, but at the end of the day, I had to just say, no, I don't need it. But they had that. So this entire campaign was a very broad-reaching campaign, but it was all built around these two card sets, the 94 set and then the 95 set, which has the parallel and the tattoos and the pins. So, really cool little piece of the football card journey in the 1990s. Just a fun little moment that we got to enjoy. Very unusual, but I mean, it's the 90s. So much of the 90s was really unusual, but this was a lot of fun and obviously thematic for this time of year if you're watching this when it's relatively new. So, I want to thank you very much for watching. Now, if you haven't subscribed, I do urge you to do so. Definitely check out my other videos. I've done videos on Santa Claus cards and McDonald's cups and fry containers, a whole bunch of different ideas which have happened over time through the journey of 90s cards. So definitely check those videos out if you haven't had a chance. And thank you very much for watching.